A drug lord blows up an entire commercial airplane just to kill one guy, who wasn't even on the flight. A dictator forces his own party members to execute their colleagues at gunpoint while he sits there smoking a cigar. A mafia boss kidnaps an 11-year-old boy, holds him for over 2 years, then dissolves his body in acid. Yeah, this video is going to mess you up. What you're about to hear are 13 real, documented acts of revenge so extreme, so absolutely unhinged, that they sound like they were pulled from a horror movie. But every single one of these actually happened. These are criminals, cartel bosses, and world leaders who didn't just get angry, they turned their rage into something the world would never forget. This is the most brutal revenge ever taken. And trust me, you're not ready for number 9. Let's begin with our usual whiteboard explaining. Pablo Escobar. In November 1989, Escobar received intelligence that a Colombian presidential candidate who was pushing hard for the extradition of drug lords to the United States was scheduled to board Avianca Flight 203 from Bogota to Cali. So what did Pablo do? He had a bomb smuggled onto the plane by a cartel operative who was told it was a recording device. The aircraft exploded 6 minutes after takeoff at roughly 13,000 feet. All 107 passengers and crew were killed instantly, and 3 more people died on the ground from falling debris. And here's the shit that makes this even more insane. Gaviria wasn't even on the damn flight. He changed his travel plans at the last minute. Pablo massacred 110 completely innocent people, including babies, for absolutely nothing. The bombing remains one of the deadliest acts of narco-terrorism in history, and led to the CIA and Colombian authorities ramping up the hunt that eventually ended Escobar's life in 1993. When Saddam Hussein officially seized the presidency of Iraq on July 16, 1979, he already had a hit list ready to go. 6 days later, on July 22nd, he called an assembly of Ba'ath Party leaders, roughly 400 senior officials packed into a conference hall in Baghdad. Saddam walked onto the stage, lit a Cuban cigar, and announced that a conspiracy had been uncovered within the party. Then, he brought out Muhyi Abdal Hussein Mashhadi, the party's secretary general, who had clearly been tortured and coerced into reading a prepared confession. One by one, names were called out. 68 officials were identified as traitors. Armed guards dragged them screaming from their seats, while the remaining members sat frozen in terror. 22 of those men were sentenced to death. And here's the truly fucked up part. Saddam forced the surviving party loyalists to form the firing squads and personally execute their former colleagues. He filmed the entire thing and distributed the tapes as a warning across Iraq. In one afternoon, Saddam eliminated every potential rival and psychologically enslaved his entire government. That's not politics, that's hell on earth. Griselda Blanco wasn't just any drug lord. She was the godmother of cocaine and one of the most terrifyingly violent figures in Miami's blood-soaked drug wars of the 1970s and 80s. She pioneered cocaine transportation routes from Colombia to the U.S. and ran her empire with an iron fist dipped in absolute madness. When her second husband, Alberto Bravo, allegedly skimmed $2 million from her drug operation, Griselda didn't sit down for a conversation. She tracked him to a parking lot in Bogota in 1975 and confronted him directly. What followed was a full-blown shootout between husband and wife. Bravo was shot dead, and Griselda reportedly walked away carrying bags of cash. But that was just a Tuesday for her. Throughout her career, she's believed to be directly responsible for ordering between 200 and 250 murders, many of them carried out by motorcycle assassins, a killing method she basically invented in Colombia. She once ordered a hit on a former associate at a daycare pickup. Shit like that is why Miami's murder rate in the early 80s was through the goddamn roof. She didn't just take revenge, she turned it into a business model. Whitey Bulger, James Whitey Bulger, ran Boston's Winter Hill Gang for decades and became one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives, right up there with Osama bin Laden. But here's the sick irony. While he was murdering snitches left and right, Bulger himself was secretly an FBI informant, feeding intel to corrupt agent John Connolly in exchange for protection. Anyone who even hinted at talking to law enforcement ended up dead in the most brutal ways imaginable. Bulger strangled people with his bare hands, shot victims in the back of the head, and buried bodies in basements across South Boston. He had victims' teeth extracted and fingers cut off to prevent identification. One of his most horrific murders was that of Deborah Davis, the 26-year-old girlfriend of his associate Steve Flemmi. Bulger feared she knew about his FBI arrangements, so he strangled her in 1981 and buried her body near the Neponset River, where it wasn't found for nearly 2 decades. He also murdered Deborah Hussey, Flemmi's stepdaughter, for similar reasons. In total, Bulger was charged with involvement in 19 murders. The bastard held grudges like a full-time job and made damn sure nobody who crossed him ever got to tell the story. The Kray twins and the Jack McVitie, Ronnie and Reggie Kray, were the undisputed kings of London's East End underworld throughout the 1960s, running protection rackets, armed robberies, and nightclubs. While rubbing shoulders with celebrities and politicians, they were untouchable until their tempers got the better of them. Jack the Hat McVitie was a small-time crook who made the fatal mistake of accepting money from the Krays to carry out a hit and then never following through. He took the cash, got wasted, and basically told everyone to fuck off. Reggie Kray wasn't having it. On October 28, 1967, McVitie was lured to a basement flat in Stoke Newington under the pretense of a party. When he walked in, Reggie pointed a handgun at his head and pulled the trigger, but the gun jammed. So Reggie grabbed a carving knife from the kitchen and went absolutely berserk, stabbing McVitie repeatedly in the face, throat, and stomach while Ronnie held him down. McVitie's body was never found. It's believed to have been disposed of by associates. The murder eventually helped bring down the Kray Empire. Both brothers received life sentences in 1969, but Vlad III Dracula. Vlad III Dracula, often called the real-life inspiration for Dracula, ruled Wallachia in the 15th century and became infamous for brutally terrifying his enemies. One story claims that when Ottoman Empire envoys refused to remove their turbans in his court, Vlad ordered them nailed directly to their skulls so they would never fall off. His most horrifying act came during the 1462 war against Mehmed II. As the Ottoman army approached the city of Tagavishta, they discovered a massive forest of the impaled. Around 20,000 captured soldiers were skewered on wooden stakes and left to rot in the heat. The scene was so damn horrific that hardened soldiers reportedly vomited, and even Mehmed II was shaken. Vlad basically turned terror into a brutal psychological weapon, and the shocking display helped force the Ottomans to retreat. El Chapo. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman didn't become the head of the Sinaloa cartel by being forgiving. In May 1993, the Arellano Felix brothers, who ran the powerful Tijuana cartel, sent a hit squad to assassinate El Chapo at Guadalajara's International Airport. The shootout was chaotic and bloody, and in the crossfire, Cardinal Juan Jesus Posadas Ocampo, one of Mexico's highest-ranking Catholic leaders, was killed along with 6 others. El Chapo narrowly escaped with his life, but he was arrested shortly after in Guatemala. He spent the next 8 years in a Mexican prison, and most people thought he was done. They were dead wrong. After his dramatic escape from Puente Grande prison in 2001, reportedly hidden in a laundry cart, El Chapo spent the next decade systematically dismantling the Arellano Felix organization. He funded splinter groups within their ranks, flipped their top lieutenants, and unleashed a wave of targeted assassinations across Tijuana that turned the city into a war zone. Ramon Arellano Felix was killed in a shootout in 2002. Benjamin was arrested weeks later. By the mid-2000s, the once mighty Tijuana cartel was a hollow shell. El Chapo didn't just get revenge, he erased his enemies from the game entirely. That's some patient, calculated, terrifying shit. Joseph Stalin developed a deep and personal vendetta against Leon Trotsky after the death of Vladimir Lenin in 1924. As both men struggled for control of the Soviet Union, Stalin eventually gained power and forced Trotsky into exile in 1929. However, exile did not end Stalin's obsession. During the Great Purge, Stalin targeted thousands of Trotsky's supporters, executing many or sending them to labor camps. Trotsky's own family was also persecuted, with his sons dying under suspicious or harsh conditions. Even after a decade, Stalin sought to eliminate his rival permanently. In 1940, Soviet agent Ramon Mercader infiltrated Trotsky's residence in Mexico City and attacked him with an ice axe. Trotsky died the following day, ending one of history's longest and most relentless political vendettas. Giovanni Brusca. This one is genuinely hard to get through, and I'm warning you right now, it's fucked beyond belief. Giovanni Brusca was a high-ranking boss in the Sicilian mafia Cosa Nostra, and the same man who personally detonated the bomb that killed anti-mafia judge Giovanni Falcone in 1992. But what he did next was infinitely worse. In November 1993, Brusca ordered the kidnapping of 11-year-old Giuseppe Di Matteo. The boy's crime? His father, Santino Di Matteo, was a former mafioso who had turned state witness and was providing testimony that could bring down major Cosa Nostra figures. Brusca's plan was simple: terrorize the father into retracting his statements by holding his son hostage. Giuseppe was held captive for 779 days, over 2 years. During that time, the boy was chained, starved, moved between safe houses, and photographed to send proof of life to his father. Despite the pressure, Santino continued cooperating with authorities, hoping police would find his son. They didn't. On January 11th, 1996, on Brusca's orders, the now 13-year-old Giuseppe was strangled to death, and his body was dissolved in a barrel of acid so no trace would remain. An innocent child, destroyed to punish his father for talking. When this became public, it caused a massive wave of revulsion across Italy. It actually turned public opinion decisively against the mafia. Brusca was captured in 1996 and sentenced to life, later reduced for cooperating. But nothing, absolutely nothing, can undo what was done to that kid. Idi Amin, Uganda's Idi Amin Dada, who seized power through a military coup in 1971, was a special kind of monster. His 8-year reign of terror produced an estimated 100,000 to 500,000 deaths, and the methods he used to eliminate perceived enemies were straight out of a nightmare. Political opponents, ethnic minorities, particularly the Acholi and Lango people, and anyone suspected of disloyalty were rounded up and taken to detention centers like the notorious Makindye prison and the headquarters of the State Research Bureau. His secret police. Prisoners were routinely tortured with hammers, beaten to death, or forced to kill each other. But Amin's signature move was having bodies, sometimes still alive, dumped into the Nile River to be devoured by crocodiles. Whether every allegation is confirmed or not, the sheer volume of witness testimony paints a picture of one of the most sadistic rulers in modern history. And the real kicker? Amin was never brought to justice. He fled to Saudi Arabia in 1979 and lived comfortably until his death in 2003. Number trial, no prison, no punishment. That shit still makes people furious. Richard Kuklinski. Richard Kuklinski, nicknamed the Iceman, was a contract killer operating primarily for the Gambino crime family out of New Jersey from the 1960s through the 1980s. He claimed to have murdered over 100 people, and while the exact number is debated, law enforcement confirmed at least 5 murders and suspected dozens more. What made Kuklinski uniquely terrifying wasn't just the body count, it was the sheer variety and creativity of his methods. He used firearms, cyanide poison, crossbows, hand grenades, chainsaws, and even a tire iron depending on the job. His signature technique, which earned him his nickname, was freezing bodies in an industrial freezer for extended periods to completely obscure the time of death, then dumping them months later so forensic investigators couldn't establish accurate timelines. Several of his kills weren't even professional contracts, they were personal revenge. Kuklinski once followed a man home and killed him because the guy cut him off in traffic. Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. The Mughal War of Succession was one of the bloodiest family struggles in history. Emperor Shah Jahan, famous for building the Taj Mahal for his wife Mumtaz Mahal, had 4 sons competing for the throne. The third son, Aurangzeb, proved the most ruthless. After defeating his elder brother Dara Shikoh at the Battle of Samugar, he publicly humiliated him and later executed him in 1659. Another brother, Murad Bakshi, was tricked and executed while Shah Shuja fled and likely died in exile. Aurangzeb then imprisoned his own father in Agra Fort, where the aging emperor spent his final years gazing at the Taj Mahal. Shah Jahan died in captivity in 1666, marking the tragic destruction of a royal family. Drug lord Amado Carrillo Fuentes, leader of the Juarez cartel, earned the nickname Lord of the Skies by using fleets of Boeing 727 to transport massive cocaine shipments from Colombia into Mexico during the 1990s, reportedly generating around $25 billion. Under his rule, Ciudad Juarez became one of the most violent cities in the world. Rivals and suspected traitors were brutally punished, with bodies often left in public as warnings. As authorities closed in, Fuentes attempted to escape by undergoing plastic surgery in Mexico City on July 4, 1997, hoping to change his appearance. He died during the operation, officially due to surgical complications, though many suspect foul play. Months later, the 3 surgeons involved were discovered murdered, their bodies hidden in chemical-filled drums along a highway. Even after Fuentes' death, the cartel's cycle of revenge and violence continued.